NATO has welcomed its newest member, raising the Swedish flag over its headquarters in Brussels. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg said the moment represented Vladimir Putin's failure to weaken the military alliance. The ceremony was held on Monday to formally mark Sweden's accession and cement its place as the alliance's 32nd member. This comes 2 years after the Nordic country applied to join following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. After the ceremony, Mr. Stoltenberg spoke alongside Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson.
When President Putin launched his full-scale invasion 2 years ago, he wanted less NATO and more control over his neighbors. He wanted to destroy Ukraine as a sovereign state. But he failed. NATO is bigger and stronger. Ukraine is closer to NATO membership than ever before.
The security situation in our region has not been this serious since the Second World War, and Russia will stay a threat to Euro-Atlantic security for a foreseeable future. It was in this light Sweden applied to join the NATO Defence Alliance to gain security, but also to provide security.
Well, our correspondent Teri Schultz joins us now from Brussels, where she's been covering NATO for many years. Welcome, Teri. You were there at NATO headquarters for the flag-raising ceremony. What was the mood there? Elation or relief that this 2-year process has finally ended?
Well, both of those emotions for sure. Both elation. I mean, really, you could see it in the faces of the Swedish officials and also Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who worked very hard personally to bring Sweden in. And also relief that there was no longer going to be these struggles between allies, this sort of having to negotiate whether they had done enough, whether the Swedes had done enough for, Turkey and Hungary to give their approval. But, there's also some trepidation because now this process exposed that the unity that NATO is always trumpeting about, isn't quite as strong as it may seem from the outside. There are things that divide the allies. And when it's something like bringing in a very capable country, then you've got to wonder what the other things are that are going to be divisive.
Yeah, let's talk about those laggards, Hungary and Turkey, who were creating obstacles over Swedish membership. Are those arguments now fully resolved, or might there be problems further down the line?
I definitely think when it comes to Turkey, with which both Sweden and Finland signed an agreement to continue what they call the trilateral talks, you will continue to hear about these issues even now that Sweden has been admitted. And that's because Turkey feels that Sweden has been too soft on certain ethnic groups, the Kurds, because there are demonstrations by the PKK, which is classified as a terrorist group throughout Europe. There will continue to be issues on this, but it won't any longer be of the scale that Turkey can prevent Sweden from operating as a full ally. And with Hungary, basically, it seemed in the end that Orban just wanted a business deal with the Swedes, and he knew that he had leverage at that time. He got a deal to buy 4 more Gripen planes from Sweden, and then suddenly the approval went through. So I think things may come up from time to time with these two allies, but they won't be as monumental as they were when they were keeping Sweden out of the alliance.
OK, so Sweden joining after 200 years of neutrality. What made the country think that joining NATO was a safer bet than staying neutral?
Well, this is an interesting question because the Swedes will tell you, many of them, that, they haven't actually been neutral since they joined the European Union in 1995. The European Union also has a mutual defense clause in which Sweden would have been drawn into any potential attack on an EU country as well, even when it didn't belong to NATO. So, to the European Union. So it hasn't been the purest of neutral countries in quite a while. At the same time, there was a big shift in thinking to joining a military alliance. And it was, you could answer this in one word, and that is Putin. Sweden no longer felt safe in the neighborhood, and especially once Finland decided that it was going to go into NATO, which it did before Sweden made that same decision, Sweden would have really felt vulnerable there, left out on its own between member Finland and Norway, and that's why it decided to join. And NATO has made clear that it doesn't believe that this threat from Russia is going to go away anytime soon, that actually all this instability is the new normal. And Sweden just felt like it would be a really good time to have friends if this is the new normal.
And so tell us more then about what Sweden brings to the table when it comes to dealing with a potential Russian military threat.
It is very experienced in dealing with Russia. I mean, it hasn't had a military encounter, nor has any other NATO ally. But Sweden is an extremely well-equipped country. It is also a really huge manufacturer of weapons. It has some of the largest ammunition producers in all of Europe. It makes really superb tanks and boats and planes. And so I think that, you know, a country that had planned on being able to defend itself into perpetuity certainly comes with a pretty big stockpile. But the other thing it has is both resilience and a long experience in dealing with Russia's hybrid attacks. You know, we're not expecting any kind of military attack on a NATO ally, but it can be unnerving to deal with constant cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns. And Sweden has been dealing with these for years, and so it can share some of those best practices. And Finland is basically in the same position when it comes to these kind of attacks.
And a word about what we might call the centrepiece of the NATO alliance. Article 5, this mutual aid, which says that an armed attack against one ally would be considered an attack against all. If a country rings that Article 5 bell, is the NATO response an automatic, we're on our way, or would there be politicking first?
Well, it's interesting. It isn't actually automatic, but we don't have a lot of experience in knowing what would happen because it's only ever been used once, and that was after 9/11 to help defend the United States. But there are a lot of steps that would lead up to a declaration of Article 5 by any country, probably the most pertinent one being Article 4, and that is that a country would call all of the allies together and say that they feel like they are being made insecure, and that's been used several times, mostly by Turkey when missiles were coming over the border with Syria. So you would have some warning before you get to Article 5, and a country would not just willy-nilly declare an Article 5 without knowing that it would rise to that level. That's the sort of language that is used, rise to the level of an Article 5, and know that the other allies would be willing to come in those circumstances. So I think that we could only hypothesize about what kind of attack it would be and where it would be. But to be honest, the reason countries join NATO and the reason that they feel more secure once they're in the alliance is because this is supposed to be something they can count on. We just don't know what those circumstances would be because it's never been used except that one time in 2001.
Clear as ever, Teri. Thank you so much for that. Teri Schultz in Brussels.